Today we're at Sanctuary Wood, Hill 62 Trench Museum, and we're here to take a look at this fascinating site of original World War I trenches. So today we're at the Sanctuary Wood Hill 62 Trench Museum. Now they do have an actual kind of museum inside as well, which is fascinating. They've got some cool stuff that's well worth looking at, but we're not here to talk about that today. We're here because they have this area of preserved trench line. Now this is such a cool spot and a place which I absolutely recommend any Great War enthusiast, if you're in the Ypres salient area, to come here. Now I've seen claims, or I've heard people say before, that these are fake, that they're recreated trenches. But they're not, they are original. If you listen to the old Frontline podcast, you can hear Paul Reed talk all about this. But I've had a look myself quite substantially. I've been looking at trench maps and Linesman, which is like the digital kind of trench map system. And you can kind of line this up here. So you can see that these are in fact original. Now, the main kind of trench they've got here behind us is actually the support line trench. This would have kind of been sort of the middle of kind of your regular trench setup. The frontline trenches would have been further forwards in what is now a field over there. This would have been the support line, and then you would have had the reserve line further back in this other field behind us. So the main piece they've got here is that sort of second line trench, and there's also a communication trench that leads up towards what would have been the front line, and we'll take a look at that as well. And they've also got here a tunnel, or at least what's left of a tunnel, that would have been used to take men forwards under cover so they could move forwards to the frontline positions. So right, let's start to explore and have a look around. Now, something which is quite interesting here is some of the trenches, I mean, you could walk through if you got the right footwear, but some of it is really thick with mud and water. And that's, look, I think it's good to see that, right? Because we're kind of seeing just a glimpse of the conditions that the guys who were here would have had to deal with. Now, a little bit of mud and water is one thing, but we're walking around this area without anyone trying to kill us. There's no artillery fire coming down, and there's not mass death and destruction all around us. So it just gives you a little glimpse. On top of all that stuff, just the basics of mud and water, just one of the thousands of hardships that the guys who were here would have had to deal with. Right, so being as lame as we are, we're going to avoid some of this muddy wet piece, and we're going to head up into some of the other bits of trench further up, which are a little bit more dry. Now, of course, when I talk about original, I don't necessarily mean every single piece. Of course, these trenches have been maintained. They have to be, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be here for us to be able to see them today. So you do see some slightly bits of newer material in them and stuff, and that's totally normal. But some of the types of material you see here would have been here during trenches. Some of that kind of corrugated iron, or I think elephant iron, it was called, something like that. That would have been used. So whilst it may be not exactly original, a lot of the stuff you see here is as it would have been during the time of the fighting here. So as you come into the kind of entrance of the trench area that they have here, you see the remnants of battle. So big old shell hole right here next to us, and there's shell holes all across this ground. This is where you kind of enter into the sort of trench system that they've got. So we're just going to work our way through, have a look and talk a little bit about some of the bits that are here. Okay, right, let's have a bit of an explore. So now the trenches here, obviously they're a little bit more shallow than they would have been. I mean, my head and shoulders is clear above ground here, which would have been a very bad idea back in the time of the war here. But as you come through, you can see, so we've got the zigzag effect of these trenches. We talked about that before on the channel. The zigzag was for a couple of reasons. Number one, let's say some artillery fire unfortunately came directly into the trench, say over there. It means the blast couldn't have kind of got round these corners. And of course, equally, if a section of trench was captured by the enemy, it means they wouldn't have had the ability just to fire directly down the trench. And that's why when you see pretty much any trenches, they are zigzagged like this. Okay, carry on moving through. Now, some of this, like we talked about, is low down, but we can still get through. We're going to have to do some crouching to get under this little piece of cover here, or some real crouching, but let's do it. We're through. This is such a fascinating site, and I really do recommend anyone who's got the ability to come here should. Now, this is an area where the Canadians fought very heavily in 1916, and just up the hill from here is a memorial to the Canadian fighting that took place here in their capture of the kind of ridgeline up there called Mount Sorrel, and we're going to take a look up the hill in just a minute. Okay, so also in here we've got a little kind of reinforced dugout. That's what this is. It isn't going anywhere. It's not a tunnel. It's a dugout. It could have been used by sort of officers, maybe sort of observation positions, or I don't think there's a front to this one. Sleeping quarters, equipment storage, all sorts, but some kind of dugout here. So when you come through this trench here, one of the things they have which is fascinating is there is the remains of a tunnel. Now this is a tunnel that was used to move men up towards that front line position. Now you can see we're on a bit of a slope here, and the German front line position was up on the ridge line ahead of us, kind of sort of up here. And so to move men forwards into a trench, especially a lot of men, let's say in advance of an attack or something, would have been very obvious to the Germans in their front line. So a tunnel was built here that went forward to the British frontline positions that could be used to secretly move men forwards. And some of it's still here. Now, I don't know how much we can get in here because it looks very wet and sloppy, but we're certainly going to have a look into the area, the kind of open entrance area of it to start with, and let's see what's what. Okay, so look, it is really dark in here. I don't know how much you guys can see, but this goes all the way through and it gets narrower and lower as you go. So I realistically can't get much further forward than this. I'm pretty much bent double in this part of the tunnel that I've got into here. But wow, I mean, this is crazy. I don't know if I can see daylight at the other end of it down there. So I don't know if it comes out at the other end. We will go forwards and have a look. Wow, this is crazy. So to give you an idea, this is how far I got in. I'm just going to come back out, and to give you an idea of the height, I literally am like the top of this is probably about my chest height. So that's how much I'm bent double to get in here. So let's head back out again and go have a look at more trenches. Okay, so the tunnel that we were just looking at went in over here, and the trench line kind of moves along further this way. Now, that tunnel would have moved forwards underneath this piece of ground, so we're going to advance forwards over there and see if we can have a look at where that would have come out. Okay, so you can tell I hadn't been here before because the tunnel does come out to the other end. So this is the other end from where the tunnel was back there in the woods. So the idea being again for this is that the men would have been able to advance forwards from that line trench up through here to the front line trench under the cover of the ground. Now, this end of the tunnel is really wet and sloppy and even smaller than the other end. So there's definitely no way I would have made it all the way through here today, but we can go down and have a bit of a look. You can just see how dark that is coming up through there. God dear. I mean, the stuff the guys had to deal with here, and on top of that, had to come through a horrible, tiny, stinking tunnel like this. God dear, it doesn't bear thinking about. Now that support line trench that we've been looking through is just over at the back there, and this is the communication trench that runs forwards and up towards what would have been the front line. Now, of course, we've seen the tunnel and that moved forwards too, but you still had to have communication trenches that went forwards, and this is that one. Now, if you have a look, it's exactly the same. It zigzags back and forth, but of course, instead of running parallel to the enemy line, so the support line trench here runs across, and of course, the front line trench up there would have run across. This one works its way forwards, and of course, it is joining the trench line back here with the trench line in the front. And you can see it zigzags its way forwards up towards the position where the front lines were here at Sanctuary Wood. So as you walk around this site, I mean, everywhere around it is just absolutely peppered with little crater holes. So there's one here, there's one there, there's one overhead, there's a bigger one here. You can see the amount of fire that these guys came under. And of course, you know, look, sometimes these artillery rounds wouldn't have landed here in this open ground. Sometimes they would have landed right here in the trench line. And you've got to remember that artillery was the absolute #1 killer in the Great War. Artillery was responsible for more deaths than anything else, more so than machine gun fire or anything. And you can see why, because just in this area, when I'm stood here, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 artillery holes, craters, just from this one little spot in front of me. Now, one of the things I've seen here, and I'm kind of freestyling a little bit here because we are here sort of on the fly today, so I will research to better say for sure, but I'm assuming that this tree here is one of the original trees. There's several reasons why. First of all, people have put like memorial crosses all over it, and I'm guessing that's because they know it's one of the original trees, but also it is absolutely blown to bits. It is nothing more than kind of half a tree stump, and if you look closely, there are battle strikes, or what I assume are battle strikes, all over it. We've got bullet holes and I guess what would be shrapnel damage, and it is absolutely torn to bits. Now, if you just look at this tree and the amount of bullet strikes and stuff that are in this tree, gives you an idea what this area would have been like. Now, I'll research this and I'll put like a pinned comment or something into it to confirm what I'm saying, but I am 90% sure that this will be one of the very few remaining trees that was stood here at the end of the war, and I would guess probably the only one that still remains today. Now, on the back of what I was just saying, when I say only tree, I mean kind of the only sort of higher up, not even full height one. What we do have is these kind of tree stump remains, trees that have just been absolutely blown apart by, I'm assuming, artillery fire. There's one there, there's one here, and then there's another one just over here as well. So you can see the remnants. I mean, look how this has just been torn to shreds. Well, if that's what artillery fire does to a tree, you can imagine what it did to the guys who were here. So as we said before, when we were on the other side of the wood here, the German positions were out on the ridge line behind us up here. Today, that's the site of the Canadian Memorial. So we're going to head up there now to go take a look. Now, we've just come up to the crest of Hill 62 now, and this is the site of the Canadian Memorial, one of the Canadian memorials in the area of Ypres. The actual wood, Hill 62, and the trenches are just down here behind us. Now, this is a place of predominant high ground, and when you look around this, you can see why. Now, the Germans launched a big attack from this position down the hill into those trenches at Sanctuary Wood, and that was during a time when the Canadians were holding the line there. So let's just talk a little bit about that battle now. So we're just up here by the Canadian Memorial now, and you can see down into Sanctuary Wood. So the trenches we were exploring are just down here in this tree line, and you can see the view of that area that the Germans had here. So on the 2nd of June 1916, the Germans launched an attack down into that position. There were some mines that were blown and flamethrowers were used here, and the Germans went in to the attack. The Canadian 3rd Division suffered terribly with a lot of casualties, including their divisional commander, Major General Mercer, and in fact he became the highest ranking British and Commonwealth officer to be killed in the Ypres salient. Now, the Canadians launched a big counterattack back up into this position here and did recapture this land, but in that period of time they lost 8,000 men taking this piece of ground here at Hill 62. Now, as they approach the memorial itself, we can see it looks much the same as some of the other Canadian memorials we've seen. The one at Passchendaele, for example. And here it says on the memorial, here at Mount Sorrel and on the line from Hooge to Saint-Éloi, the Canadian Corps fought in the defences of Ypres, April to August 1916. One of the things I like they've got here is kind of some directional arrows telling you sort of where we are, and you can see what I mean about the high ground. So in that direction is Zonnebeek. Out ahead of us here is Hoog, and there's me. Over this way we have Ypres or Ypres, and in fact you might not be able to make it out on the camera, but out there on the horizon you can see the towers of the Cloth Hall and the cathedral in the centre of Ypres. So you can see how sort of dominating this piece of high ground was here, looking down over Sanctuary Wood. So I hope you guys enjoyed this look around the Sanctuary Wood Trench Museum, and then up here on the crest of Hill 62. It really is a fascinating site and one that I really recommend you come to. It's the first time I've been in there and I found it so good. I would go on to say it probably is one of the best or most fascinating sites that I've been to, certainly around the Ypres salient. So really, really good one. If you did enjoy the video, do me a favour, do the YouTube stuff here on the screen for me. It helps me out loads and loads. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by a couple of different ways. You can check all that out in the description. But in the meantime, we're going to carry on exploring the Ypres salient. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to see you on the next video.